Hello everyone, welcome to our group presentation about the journal article Oral Corrective Feedback on Second Language Writing, Two Approaches Compared. Our presentation will last for about 15 minutes, and there are three presenters in this presentation, which are Yu Zhaohou, Yang Huang, and Jiaxin Qian. The content of this presentation is divided into four parts. In the introduction, we will look at the literature review and the aims of the study. And then the participants' research questions and more details about the research will be introduced in the methodology. Next, we are going to talk about the results and discussion. Finally, is the conclusion. Welcome to the part of introduction. I'm the presenter Yu Zhaohou. Now let's start from the literature review. Corrective feedback strategies in a cognitive interactionist paradigm can be implicit or explicit. For example, recast, which reformulate a learner's erroneous discourse, often take the form of confirmation checks, and thus learners may fail to notice that they have been corrected. In other words, there's no self-correct in the corrective feedback process. The explicit correction, which means the teacher clearly indicates that what the student said was incorrect. A potential limitation of the explicit correction is that it is less likely to make uptake to the learners than other type of feedback. Students may repair or no repair to the feedback. In contrast, the social cultural theory views language learning as interactionally driven, but as occurring in rather than as a result of interaction. Thus, correction is something carried out with learners. It enables the joint construction of a zone of proximal development, means learners are assisted to use linguistic features that they are not yet able to employ independently. The key claim of social cultural theory is that corrective feedback needs to be graduated, and that is adjusted to the level of individual learner to enable them to self-correct. The advice given to the teacher is to try to elicit self-correction from the learner rather than to correct directly and explicitly. Booth proposed a model for correcting writing errors that involve 5 main stages, starting from underlying a mistake and diagnosing it in the margin, and concluding with put across in each line with a mistake but do not show where. The underlying idea was to gradually remove the amount of assistance the teacher provided, so as to foster self-dependence on the part of students. Therefore, based on these theories, the main aim of the study is to compare the differences of interactions that using two types of feedbacks, graduate feedback and explicit feedback.
Next, I will introduce the method of this article in detail. Firstly, there are two research questions. One is that to what extent learners can be motivated by graduate feedback and explicit correction to self-correct their errors or accept teachers' corrections during writing conferences. The other is that what significant changes have occurred in the successful implementation of graduated feedback and explicit correction over time. In order to solve these problems, this article adopts a number of research methods. The first one is participants. The participants were all adult students of L2 English in a New Zealand language school. They were assigned to two groups, namely the graduate group and the explicit group. The graduate group came from the general English stream, a total of 7 people. 5 students were classified by the language school as pre-intermediate students, and 2 as elementary students. They had spent an average of 2.5 months in the language school. However, the explicit group came from the academic English stream, a total of 8 people. They were classified as strong pre-intermediate. They had spent an average of 2 months in the language school. Then the next part is about tasks. The participants were given 2 narrative texts to reconstruct. In the first writing task, the participants were asked to read a narrative text within 20 minutes. During this process, not only could they take notes, but they could also look up words. After reading the text, The students were asked to handwrite it without text within 1 hour. They then received conferencing. Between 2 and 4 weeks later, the participants were given a new narrative text, and after making notes in the same way as for the first writing task, write the story based on this text. They then participate in a second feedback conference. In these two feedback conferences, a researcher is responsible for providing feedback. The researcher is a native English speaker and has experience teaching ESOL in various contexts. Students in the graduate group received an intervention designed to provide the appropriate level of assistance to encourage the learner to function at his or her potential level of ability. However, students in the explicit group were given explicit correction. In addition, the feedback provided mainly focuses on two target structures. One is past tense verb forms, and the other is use of the indefinite a and definite article the with contenance. Then the next part is about data collection. All the writing conferences were audio recorded and transcribed. The first step in coding the data was to identify the feedback episodes. Each episode started with the student's attention is drawn to the location of a specific error by the teacher. In the graduate group, it ended with a resolution or with non-resolution. But in the explicit group, it ended with the learner uptaking or not uptaking the correction. For coding the feedback episodes, a scheme has been developed. This was in two parts. The first part is that the learner is given corrective feedback by the teacher using different strategies. Examples of these strategies are indicating there is something wrong with a sentence and using a metalinguistic term to help locate an error. The second part consisted of categories for coding the resolution or non-resolution of an episode. Then the last part is about data analysis. Not only qualitative analysis is used, but also quantitative analysis is used. Regarding the quantitative analysis, count the number of times each learner was able to self-correct or to uptake the teacher's feedback if self-correction did not occur. At the same time, a qualitative analysis of the strategies used to correct individual learners in the graduate feedback and explicit groups was undertaken.
Hi everyone, this is Chen Jiaxin and I will talk about the results that extract from the data and the discussion as well. So the first two tables review the numbers and types of feedback that occurred in the two groups, which answer the first research question, while the last three tables identify the strategies that used, which are related to the second question. So let's start with the first one. So from the chart, we could see that the amount of feedback here in graduate group is more than the explicit group. Therefore, the time that spent is also more than the other group. However, for both groups, the total amount of feedback is declined from conference 1 to conference 2. Yeah, as you can see here. From the second table, what we can see here is that the feedback in the graduate group is mainly self-corrected type, while in the explicit group, it is generally uptake with repair feedback, which align with the assumptions that mentioned at the beginning of the study. And interestingly, the errors are more likely to be solved through using graduated feedback, as you can see here, the no resolution column. So the number in the graduated group is less than the one in the explicit group. The third chart counted the number of strategies that used, and the result shows that there is a declination for the graduate group in the first conference, but then it increased in the second conference. So in contrast to this fluctuation, the explicit group seems have little change here. In case the average number couldn't represent the individual performance, the authors also randomly chose 2 individuals from the graduate group. However, both of them indicate that though there's a reduction of strategies, for example here, the 9, 6, and 7 disappeared in the second conference, but it couldn't prove that there is a systematic reduction. And it remains the same in the second student. So let's move on to the next section, the discussion part. So this result answers the 2 research questions. One is that for the graduate group, the self-correct feedback is more successful, and the explicit group is less effective to achieve solutions. As for the second question, it shows that the level of assistance is reduced, especially in the graduate group. But as mentioned before, it couldn't prove that the learning occurred on account of the insufficient research for individual learners. And according to the 4 extracts provided by the study, 2 things could be noticed. One is that the teacher may use implicit feedback first and then move to use explicit feedback for the purpose of achieving solutions. Another one is that being able to self-correct or uptake doesn't mean that learners have fully acknowledged and internalized the errors. So that's all of my part, and let's welcome you all back to make the conclusion.
In the part of conclusion, we will explore the strengths, drawbacks, and critiques of the study. Algebra and Lentov provided a macrogenetic analysis of a selective feedback episode, but there is no explanation of why they choose this episode. In this study, a more systematic quantitative analysis of the feedback episode was obtaken, in addition to a qualitative analysis of illustrative protocols. However, there also have some drawbacks. The result of the study has failed to demonstrate the social-cultural theory claims that if over time the learner's self-error assistance is systematically reduced, then the learning is evident. And there is no consistent evidence showing that self-regulation was taking place. Another drawback is there is no evidence to support the graduate feedback is benefit for self-regulation. The first critique is individuals are all from graduated group, but in the research question 2 has mentioned that we need to select individuals from graduated group and explicit group. The second critique is that there is no further explore in the discussion about the changes which is mentioned in the table 3. In the table 3, have the result about a little change in the number of strategies employed to address article errors either within or between conferences, but there is no further discussion. Here are the discussion questions about our presentation. Thanks for your watching.